It is my pleasure to introduce our second feature today, Wayne Miller. And Wayne, I was thinking about this, actually Claire reminded me on the walk over today, you read for Smartish Pace like 15 years ago? And that's right, yeah, like 15 years ago in Baltimore, so welcome back. I think that was at the Walters Art Museum? Yeah, at the Walters Art Museum. So making his return, Wayne Miller, he is the author of 6 collections of poetry, most recently The End of Childhood, which looks like this and is available for sale over there, along with Rebecca's book, and I'm sure they would both be happy to sign their books after the reading. Wayne's awards include fellowships from the NEA and the Poetry Foundation, as well as a UNT Rilke Prize, 2 Colorado Book Awards, 2 Pushcart Prizes, 6 individual awards from the Poetry Society of America, the Bess Hokin Prize from Poetry Magazine, and many others. I did trim the list down. There's so many awards, and rightfully so. Wayne has co-translated 2 books by the Albanian writer, I'm gonna mispronounce this.
You got it.
Moikom Zeqo.
Very close, that's good.
Wayne's gonna correct that for us in a minute. He's gonna clean that up. The most recent book by this Albanian writer, whose name I can't possibly pronounce, is called Zodiac, and Wayne co-translated that book. Wayne has also co-edited 3 books, most recently Literary Publishing in the 21st Century, which appeared from Milkweed Editions. He teaches at the University of Colorado, Denver. He co-directs the Unsung Masters Series, and he edits the highly acclaimed and personally a favorite poetry magazine of mine, Copper Nickel. Please welcome Wayne Miller.
Hello, can you hear me? I'm going to continue to stay right on this mic because it does sound crazy loud up here, but apparently it doesn't back there. I just want to thank Stephen and Claire for inviting me and also just for supporting me for like my entire writing career. Stephen has been publishing me on Smartish Pace, both translations and my own poems, for a very long time, and I'm very grateful for that. It's one of the best magazines around, and it's really important to me, so thank you. And it's also great to read with Rebecca, who is a wonderful poet who I've known since we were both in Missouri many years ago now. We were just talking before this and realizing exactly how long ago that was, and it was scary. People really like this term late capitalism, and I feel like that comes with a lot of optimism or a lot of pessimism. It's one or the other. I'm neither that optimistic nor that pessimistic. I just feel like we could just keep muddling terribly through forever. This is my poem about that term and about all us poets inside of it. Late capitalism. The poets lived their lives in late capitalism. They wrote their poems, bought their hybrids in late capitalism. They sent their kids to the best schools they could afford in late capitalism, made their homes in the economic centers of late capitalism. They pursued each other with the sexual vigor of late capitalism. They ate the charcuterie platters of late capitalism. They celebrated the cultural inclusivity of late capitalism as they taught in the universities of late capitalism, visited the resort towns of late capitalism. They rode around the world on the wings of late capitalism. They retired inside the 403Bs of late capitalism. They promoted their events online in late capitalism. They vaped in the alleys of late capitalism, drank the imported whiskeys of late capitalism. They gathered conspicuously on the steps of late capitalism. Their meager crowd shook its fists at late capitalism. They were buried in the caskets of late capitalism, cremated in the fires of late capitalism. And you in the future of late capitalism, looking back at us through the glacier of late capitalism, What particles do you find sealed in late capitalism? What light penetrates the glassy compression of late capitalism? This poem also features the word late. The late Cold War. Children, what can I tell you about that time? When my parents separated, my father moved into the college dorms on Jefferson. I have no idea how this happened. The adult world was a ceiling of clouds above me. I saw my father on Saturdays. Each visit, a toy dropped into my hands. Meanwhile, my mother lived on the money her parents gave her. My best friend's older brother had posters of nuclear explosions all over his bedroom. At night, they became the walls of his sleep. He let us listen to Bauhaus and the Damned until he went to his job at Friendly's, where he sold pot out the walk-up window. It's impossible to understand what you're born into until enough passes that all of it has been replaced by narrative. One night, we were driving to my father's new apartment with the woman he'd left my mother for, and I could see the pale discs of Klieg lights sweeping across the clouds. I was 8 and terrified the Soviets were invading. I clutched my backpack full of clothes in the empty dark of the back seat. My father, in a moment of pity, assured me we would drive until we found the source. It was a car lot having a sale. Okay, this is going to sound terrifying, but I don't mean it to. The opening section of this book is just one poem that's in 43 sections, but I'm not going to read all 43 of those sections. I'm just going to read some of them. And the way these sections work is they have a title, and then they have just a couple lines. They're very short, but the titles will recur with different poems, and then sometimes the little poems will recur with different titles. So there's a kind of shifting around that happens. This is called Toward a Unified Theory. Children, condemned to live inside the weather of our moods. Joy, what are you doing? Filling this bucket with water and dumping it into the water. Death, we close their eyes, not for them, but for us. Poetry, one mouth moving another. Zoo, the plexiglass separating us from the animals brings them closer. Pandemic, we live inside each other's breath. History, the man in the grocery store wearing an ankle monitor, tube sock pulled up over it. Memory, his suffering inside that house became the house. Pandemic, my son's recurring dream, sailing a balloon over an endless ocean. The future, our dead are approaching. How should we prepare for their arrival? Politics, when the plane is going down, all you can do is hold on to the thing that's falling. Death, as a pepper grows, so does the air inside it. Poetry, what are you doing? Filling this bucket with water and dumping it into the water. Joy, those heavy marks in the grass left by the carnival, the weight of which we never considered not once. Faith, after his daughter died, he came at last to believe in God, so he had something permanent against which to direct his rage. Love, when I was 4 time zones away from you, I never reset my watch. Elegy, on her last visit to the mountains, her window opened onto a stream, so comforting, she said, to sleep beside that forever sound of leaving. Door means a wall can be broken and can heal. Mortality. In your Zoom window, the daylight was rapidly diminishing. Here, it was noon. History. Condemned to live inside the weather of our moods. Politics. It's good to say, if the plane goes down, the pilots do too. History. What are you doing? Filling this bucket with water and dumping it into the water. This is for my younger kiddo, Sean. For Sean. When I was a boy, I was so often on a plane in the empty sky between my parents, in the indistinct care of flight attendants, that when I handed you over to the system of the hospital, it felt like I had put you on a plane. I imagined you watching a screen, watching the clouds, the nation below like a pincushion. Where were you going in that thin, bright air? I walked to the vending machines. They were a dark kind of center. The smallness I was in those hours was what I'd thought my parents became when I was gone. I tried to read in my vinyl chair while you were there in that parentless place, but also inside this bit of my childhood, which couldn't protect you, but could carry you back to me like a plane. When I was growing up, my dad lived in Anchorage, Alaska, and I lived in Ohio, so I really did spend a lot of time on long plane flights by myself. This is called Anchorage. Nights awake in my father's house, his passed out snoring down the hall, his new wife having left again for a hotel, the world sealed in snow. To love him and still want to be lifted from there, to want to leave and leave no footprints. And also the curious wish that someone might be awake in a window watching me. This was, I now realize, a first longing to be read, though I had no interest then in poetry, which can say, "Child, you will be lifted from that room. You can see yourself from every window." I thought I would try maybe 2 new poems and then come back to the book. I've never read these before. One of them is kind of angry. That's this one. It's called 14 Executive Orders. 1. It has 14 sections, but they're very short. I like sections, but I know they sound scary. I'm sorry. 14 Executive Orders. Our children shall remain locked in the rooms where they were born. This is to prevent the impending corruption of the commons. 2. The layout of the national cubicles must occur in accordance with common sense principles of hierarchy. 3. Maps will be redrawn and redrawn until each American contains his own national border. 4. Christians shall be protected from art that depicts Christians poorly, since such art is likely to enter the national conversation capitalistically and without forewarning. 5. The Department of the Interior is now called the Department of the Soul. 6. Wind will be deemed unpredictable and unharnessable like the rich. 7. The country will be filled with smoke from sea to shining sea. Our borders will rise into the air to contain it. The people will stumble against each other inside it. 8. Like all great capitalist products, memory must result from rigorous competition. 9. As Walter Benjamin said, documents of culture must be understood as documents of barbarism. This relationship will now be optimized through executive enforcement. 10. The nation's undesirables will become an internationally traded commodity. Markets will be maintained and readjusted through future executive action. 11. Those doing the work of enforcement must be masked. Violence in the service of the state will become anonymized, randomized, and exalted as in a video game. 12. Despite assurances from the framers, the primary purpose of government has always been to remind the people of their powerlessness. 13. Americans shall no longer take their abstractions in vain. 14. Seen will be the future tense of sin. Death mask / on forgiveness. I should say, you know those death masks that they used to do in the 19th century? So that's the metaphor here. Death mask on forgiveness. I was closer to your face than I'd been in many years, an absurd intimacy. I brushed on the oil, your eyebrows grew slightly darker, and then the first layer of plaster, I let it dry before the next, and soon your face was erased by eggshell. Of course, you couldn't breathe in there. Of course, you didn't need to. When at last I lifted the mold, it seemed as if your features had changed just slightly. I couldn't explain how. Years later, I took down that cast and poured wax into it, then lifted out your face. I ran my finger over your brow line, your closed eyes. I could see how light just barely filled you. And when I turned the face over against my palm, the back was perfectly flat, like the windless surface of a lake. I think I have time for 2 more. Does that sound right? Okay. One that's a little longer and then a very short one. It's called On Narrative, again, in a couple sections. Apologies. On Narrative. 1. This begins with something that really happened that was a terrible thing that my kids and I encountered. On Narrative. 1. We were in a little beachfront restaurant when lightning struck a man maybe 30 feet away, rushing for shelter from the sudden storm. A whiteout explosion, the shock poured down through him and into the sand, then rose up through the bodies of his 4 friends, and they all collapsed and were dragged inside. What I've learned are Lichtenberg figures surfacing on their chests as the man struck through the head was given CPR, his body jiggling mute and pale, and our son closed his eyes against my shirt, and you tried to narrate gently what was happening, and our daughter cried, and that evening the news told us the man had died while his friends were in stable condition. So when the kids went to bed, at last we drank rum and said repeatedly in different ways what had happened. 2. It's crass to admit, because a man is dead and my children are still terrified of thunderstorms, but I know the strange intensity of this story, and even as I try to honor the awfulness of the event, the loss of life and its effect on all of us who were there, in its telling, the story becomes a kind of pleasure, if that's the right word. I hate to say it, pleasure. 3. My friend's husband died quietly after a year-long fight with the cancer that had surfaced inside him, so we attended to her for a while, then left her swaddled in elegy, and then it was a month, before I saw her again, surprisingly at my local bookshop, laughing with a friend I didn't know, and I'm ashamed to say I felt in that moment that she had betrayed her narrative without permission from those of us who tended that narrative. She'd become a story of pleasure, which was forbidden to her. It was only a momentary feeling, thank God, but it happened, so I'm telling you. 4. When I think of lightning pulsing down through a man, then rising up from the ground into the bodies of his friends, when I think of cancer dispatching its terrible colonial ships into new regions of the body, when I think about a story spreading outward from its event, I think of how aspens, my favorite trees, send up suckers from their roots that have unfurled like Lichtenberg figures invisibly beneath the lawn, and this sudden overlay of images is what became this poem. 5. Literature mostly wants the world to be complex, intensified, an entanglement of difficulty, paradox, and time, narrowed and compressed through the strange and disorienting periscope of the mind. But tonight we'll have a drink together while the kids watch their show. Maybe we'll split a cigarette out behind our grove of aspens, keeping alive this one small illicit pleasure, the tiny glowing dot of us increasing and diminishing for no one to see, this joy that's barely worth saying. The end of childhood. This is the short one. My daughter is building a path across the lake. Each morning she goes out with an armful of boards and hammers them into the ice. Her brother brings the coffee can of nails, tucks the hammer into his belt. The ice is thick, the path is growing. We watch them all day from the railing. No one else lives at this end of the valley, though up around the bend there are lights. My daughter's project is not to reach them, she tells us, but just to leave a perfect track of boards floating on the water. That first day, the ice has melted. Thank you.